New religious movements were the product of the 1970s and 80s neoliberal approach to life. People were beginning to reject traditional norms and values, which included well-established religions such as Christianity. Also referred to as cults or sects, they are distinct branches of mainstream religion whose followers began to lack faith in the rigid teachings that were not always associated with contemporary life. Weber elaborates this by stating how more people were beginning to lose faith in well-established religions as they do not provide adequate answers to their questions or fears. With the rise of new religious groups, individuals were now able to mould and reform their chosen religion in a way that suited their spiritualistic lifestyle. These movements are categorized into three types by Willis in 1984. The first is world-affirming groups, which live in the real world but try to find new ways to relate to it, such as Scientology. The second is world-accommodating movements, which refers to those who branch out from an existing and well-established religion, such as Neo-Pentecostalism, which is a product of the Catholic faith. Lastly, world-rejecting groups have their own strong ethical codes which subvert those of the outside world, such as the People's Temple or Jonestown. At the centre of most new religious movements lies a charismatic leader who on the exterior seems every bit the holy man and messiah, with groundbreaking religious ideas, but it is this personality which allows for potential brainwashing and manipulation. It's these tendencies which warrant the group's bad publicity. In this film, I shall be focusing on the acts and beliefs of the infamous world-rejecting cult Heaven's Gate to analyse the ultimate question that new religious movements pose. Are its members insane or just dedicated to the cause? The group was created by Bonnie Nettles and Marshall Applewhite during what they called their awakening period in 1972 to 75. Bonnie was a registered nurse who was a member of a spiritualist group that claimed to be in communication with departed spirits and space aliens. Whilst Marshall grew up in a strict Presbyterian family and taught music at the University of Alabama. Upon meeting in 1972, the pair felt an immediate connection and soon began to believe that they had been together in a previous life and that their meeting was destined. Together they continued to question Orthodox Christianity and exploring alternative religious ideals. Shortly after, Marshall began having visions of men dressed in white telling him that he was destined to become Christ-like, which Bonnie called prophetic. Following various family issues and unemployment, the couple became increasingly reclusive and devoted themselves to their spiritual encounters, believing this disintegration of their personal lives as God's means of focusing them on their religious mission. In 1973, after 6 months of travelling, meditating and praying, they discovered a prophecy in which God gives power to two holy messengers who are regenerated after being martyred and ascend to heaven in a cloud. Bonnie and Marshall came to believe that this cloud was in fact a spaceship and that heaven was a tangible place that could only be reached in a living body aboard this spaceship. They named their resurrection the demonstration because it showed how they alone had discovered the secret to overcoming death. After the demonstration, their followers would be taken on a spaceship to the kingdom of heaven, or next level, and become immortal androgynous beings. To become eligible for this, members would have to shed all earthly attachments such as their family, possessions and sex. However, their initial attempts at recruiting followers failed miserably, which caused their approach to turn apocalyptic. Human civilization would have to be destroyed after the demonstration. After various propaganda campaigns such as rallies and promotional videos, the pair managed to recruit 24 like-minded individuals who aided them in gaining a further 200 followers in the United States.
Planet Earth about to be recycled. Your only chance to survive or evacuate is to leave with us.
With this surge of new recruits to their flock, they changed their names to Bo and Peep and continued to draw attention from those who felt similar feelings of marginalisation and a desire for personal transformation and immortality. The group travelled constantly, camping out in isolated areas and begging for provisions which enabled them to overcome their humanness through avoiding employment, music and sex. The media soon became intrigued into the group's movements, but ridiculed their beliefs and deemed Bo and Peep as nothing more than brainwashing lunatics. However, this negative publicity only increased their sense of urgency, leading them to film a final statement which was to be broadcast after their departure. Propaganda drives continued in full force, but when the demonstration failed to happen, over half of the members defected by the end of 1975. In 1976, they changed their names again to Doe and T and stopped all attempts at spreading their message in favour of preparing their class for the demonstration in a boot camp-like regime which reflected life aboard the spaceship down to the minute. By the end of 1978, there were only 48 members left. For nearly a decade, the class of Heaven's Gate continued to lay low and adopt a basic lifestyle until T died suddenly of liver cancer in 1985. Her death contradicted one of the key teachings of the cult, as it was believed that in order to reach the next level, you needed to be in a living physical vehicle. However, Doe rationalised her death by stating that she had been forced to leave her body as it was not strong enough to hold her energy. This led to the updated belief that there was no need to physically board the spaceship in order to leave the planet. Instead, the body was merely a decaying container for the soul. Members began thinking of ways to leave the planet without a spaceship, and many entertained the idea of suicide, as waiting to die naturally was out of the question. In 1995, the group bought an exclusive mansion in the mountains of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and began construction of 2 large Earthships. During this phase, 64-year-old Doe's health rapidly declined, which led to the conclusion that the time had come to depart the planet. They all re-recorded their departure tapes, insisting that they were happy and excited to move on to the next level.
I'm very proud of these students. They're about to leave, and they're excited about leaving.
And this is the happiest day of my life. I mean, I've been looking for this for so long.
This is a very joyous time for the class to be able to be returning home.
I am very excited about going. I can hardly wait, and I'm ready to go.
We have no fear. We're proud and looking forward to what's ahead. And couldn't be happier about what we're about to do. By dropping these bodies, we will receive the inheritance we have been promised of eternal life in a physical, next-level body.
I'm about to take an act that probably this world would consider the most awful thing that any person could do. I have chosen to do it. It's not something that somebody brainwashed me into.
And in making the decision that we made to do this, we know that we broke hearts, we know that we hurt people. We don't take that lightly. We didn't want to hurt anyone.
And one last thing we'd like to say is 39 to beam up. Thank you.
The suicides began on the 23rd of March 1997 and lasted for 3 days. Each of the 39 deaths were very calculated and followed a strict process. Unconsciousness was induced through the eating of applesauce laced with barbiturates, which was then washed down with vodka. A plastic bag was then secured over the individual's head by rubber bands at the neck, which caused suffocation. They were all dressed in black tracksuits, which had badges displaying Heaven's Gate away team, and wore black Nike trainers. Purple shrouds were laid over their heads, and travel bags and passports were found next to them on the floor. Various notes in the departure videos were left for the sheriffs to find. Upon finding the bodies, the sheriffs confirmed that these suicides were entirely voluntary, which to this day still baffles the media and public. In the light of this account, it's understandable why many people believe cult members to be insane and or brainwashed. This being a potential consequence of the exclusive nature of the group through the cutting of social ties from family and the outside world. However, it can be argued that members of these movements are socially deprived before entering the group, as they are typically outcasts. Hence why the main reason that individuals go in search for new religious movements in the first place is to fill a void, such as a sense of community and belonging. Weber discusses this through his work on the theodicy of disprivilege, which relates to low-status groups in society such as the unemployed, disabled, and ethnic minorities. He argues how this underclass is targeted by cults and sects, as they can provide answers for these individuals and help them gain higher status in the future when the existing social order cannot. This can be seen to a certain extent with the Heaven's Gate members, as some were mentally unstable with little social mobility. However, as stated by Stark and Bainbridge, it's common for middle-class people to join new religious movements as well. As seen in Heaven's Gate, the majority of the members were white and from seemingly ordinary backgrounds, which contradicts the belief that cult members are insane. They wholeheartedly believe in the group's message with no ulterior motive or exterior influence. This leads on to various arguments presented by contemporary sociologists such as Jones, that cult membership and violence is not a result of disillusion and isolation, but rather a conscious decision undertaken by the individual freely. With Heaven's Gate, despite various disengagement techniques with society, the group was still in touch with the outside world through their use of propaganda and rallies, meaning that they were fully aware that their acts were unconventional and shocking to the world, yet still believed. Furthermore, the members' ability to leave the group at any time and return to normality emphasises the lack of coercion and that they were there by choice. From these arguments, it's clear how complex the issues are surrounding new religious movements, and that there will always be difficulties in determining whether or not its members are rational beings. However, from this film, it's evident that believing in something outlandish and unconventional doesn't necessarily relate to mental instability, and that it's all personal to the individual and group.